Welcome to the Bucky Brooks Show. I am Bucky Brooks, and this is going to be a little State of the Union pod for all my Jags people. We're talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars just coming off the heels of their preseason debut against the New Orleans Saints. I was there in the building, had a chance to call the game for the local station, and also had a chance to kind of be around the team for the entire weekend. And so I was able to kind of pull some cool nuggets that I want to share with you guys. But before we even get into the mix, I want to talk about FanDuel Sportsbook. I want to throw up these odds because when I tell you this later, it will make sense. Parker Washington right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, regular season touchdown receptions, receiving touchdowns. The over 4.5 right now, the payoff is minus 114. I said on the pod a couple of weeks ago that I believe that Parker Washington is the number one for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think that is going to play out. So if I'm laying a little wager on a little prop bet on Parker Washington, I think I'm going to play the over on that receiving touchdown line. It makes all the sense to me, and it's make more sense after we talk about some of these conversations that I had with the guys. And so I'll let you know, this was an interesting week. The Saints and the Jaguars not only played the game on Saturday, but they had joint practice sessions on Thursday. I got down right after those practice sessions concluded, but I was able to kind of get away, sneak away, talk to some of the guys, review some of the tape, and really discuss all the things that went on. And the prevailing theme for the preseason was Liam Coen wanted to take a different approach to this preseason. In year two, he felt like the foundation had been established last year, so the guys played during the preseason. He wanted to get them up and playing. He wanted to kind of create the environment and the culture about being a very competitive team, a team that, look, you put the ball down anytime, any place against anybody that they would take it on. Now that you've established kind of that very competitive mindset, that competitive mentality, what you now want to do in year two is you want to make sure that you get to the regular season opener with all of your stars intact. So this year, you'll see that there are 3 joint practice sessions. So they have a joint practice session with everybody on the preseason schedule. First, it was the Saints. Then this week coming up, the Carolina Panthers will come to town. And then finally, against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they have joint practice sessions on the docket. The reason why it was important for the Jaguars to have the joint practice sessions is because you get all of the benefits of playing in a preseason game, but a controlled environment that should minimize some of the injury risk that you have to your star players, particularly the quarterback. And because you're able to get those things done, you basically empty the clip in those joint practice sessions, not only in going good on good, your starters against their starters, your best plays against their best plays, because the film is not circulated around the league. You get a chance to go through the things that you've been working on all off season. You get a chance to put it on tape against another team that is playing in a very competitive situation. This is great because you're beginning to work on the rhythm and the timing, not only of the passing game, but of the running game to set yourself up success when you kick it off against the Cleveland Browns in week 1. Then on game day, you get a chance to play all the young players, all of the bubble guys, all of the rookies, all the guys that are embroiled in a starting competition. You can play those guys and have them in game-like conditions and allow them to play an entire game. So the reps are invaluable for the young guys who are going to eventually develop. And real talk, they're going to be counted on down the stretch because some of these guys will make the practice squad, and then eventually they'll come onto the roster, and we may need them later when they make their appearance. And the only way to prepare them for those roles is to give them as many reps as you can during the preseason, so you have a clear idea how they could respond when they get their chance in the regular season. So when talking to Liam about that, he said, look, I just want to get to week 1. This is something that has been popularized by the LA Rams and people, guys coming out of that McVay system. Hey, let's keep our guys on the side. Let's practice hard, but let's make sure that we don't hurt ourselves before we get to the starting line. Let's try and do that. Now, and talking to Liam before the game, one of the things that he had for the first week of the preseason that he wanted to see, his goals were he wanted a clean football game. He wanted the team to be fundamentally sharp. He wanted to play with a level of violence and physicality that kind of matched the brand. This is a team that wants to play with an edge. This is a team that, look, their calling card is they want to beat you up. They want to outwork and outlast you, over the course of a 60-minute game. And when you watch this team play and how they compete, look, they do play hard. They are unquestionably a very physical team. And I think that is important in a division where the Houston Texans are physical. I know that the Tennessee Titans are going to be physical. And even the Indianapolis Colts have a level of physicality to them that you have to turn up the dial a little bit when you play within the division. So in building a physical team, it's really important that those things show up on tape. And it has been a huge emphasis. Going to the practice session first, one of the things that showed up or that kind of happened over the course of the day is, look, the New Orleans Saints came to play. They brought a level of physicality and energy that may have kind of took the Jaguars by surprise initially, and then eventually they turned up the dial and they kind of met them and matched them and kind of played to the brand, particularly on defense. And what is important to know about that joint practice session, there were 92 defensive snaps. The big-time guys probably got half of those. I think Josh Hines-Allen told me he got like 45, 47 snaps, which is a lot of snap for this stage of training camp. And it was good work. It was work that will benefit them because they got a chance to go against the big bodies up front. They got a chance to defend against the run game, which is important considering they were the number one run defense in football last year. But more importantly, they have some pass rush opportunities against a team that has a very clever schemer in Kellen Moore, and they have a really good wide receiver core on the outside that can challenge some of the things that you want to do. Up front, they talk about being able to dominate in the trenches, and Josh Hines-Allen, when I talked to him prior to the game, he said, look, man, we have to make sure that we are always operating at a high level. I specifically asked him about him and Trayvon and the pressure that they may feel to be the guys that kind of have to carry the pass rush. They talked about the contributions of some of the other guys that are emerging as key factors. They mentioned B.J. Green, who was not only mentioned by players, but the coaching staff mentioned him. And then he followed it up with a very, very solid performance during the game. B.J. Green being a bit of an energizer bunny, someone who was originally counted on to be like one of those rotational pass rushers, but he's shown up to be a tougher guy against the edge. He is someone that, look, the coaching staff, the team, they're really excited about the things that he's shown. And it appears that he is kind of carving out a nice role for himself down the line. Still has to finish off the preseason the way that you want to see it, but his energy, his electricity, his physicality and violence shows up. So look for him to be a big part of the puzzle at some point. But back to these practice sessions, heard Trayvon Walker talk about during the in-game interview. He just talked about like good work, quality work, want to be physical, want to get used to playing with their pads on, playing against a physical team and being able to impose their will. And talking to Josh Allen, I asked him, because the common thing that came out of the conversations that you're hearing from the defense, I mean, we run to the ball. Not many teams are going to run to the ball like we run to the ball. It is a point of emphasis. It is stressed. It's coached. It's emphasized. It's reviewed. It's rated. There are consequences to not running to the ball. So when you see the Jaguars play defensively, man, you talk about 11 guys playing with their hair on fire. That is important to playing great defense. I go back to listening to Tony Dungy talk about those great teams, those great defenses down at Tampa, and they talked about the standard of effort that has to show up each and every day, each and every week on the practice field, and particularly on game day. And the Jaguars have certainly turned that corner under Anthony Campanile. And in fact, Josh Hines-Allen talks about Camp really getting after them guys about running to the ball and playing at another level where they overwhelm the team, the opponent, with their effort, with their energy. Running to the ball is a huge part of that. And running to the ball is also a big part of why they're able to stop the run, because everyone is flowing to the ball. Everyone wants to be in the action. And then the turnovers last year, good things happen to teams that run to the ball. You think about the number of turnovers that they were able to manufacture off tips or overthrows or just running to the ball and punching the ball out. It is a hustle hard defense, and it's really important that they play at that level each and every time they step across those lines, and you're beginning to get that feel from the Jaguars all over again. And also talking about the defense, had a chance to talk to Josh Hines-Allen about some of the things that we are hearing about, like the linebacker core and the linebacker competition between Branson Combs and Ventrell Miller. And they just talked about the importance of just having guys on the second level that just understand what they're doing, but more importantly, man, they run to the football. They're sideline to sideline playmakers, and they're guys that they love to kind of bring the violence and the physicality. When you look at this competition at will linebacker between Combs and Miller, I've been told that it's not just a situation where it's winner take all, that this is going to be a shared role situation, meaning Ventrell Miller is probably going to be the guy that handles the role on rundowns because he's a downhill striker. You feel his presence against the run game. But then Branson Combs is going to be the guy that on passing downs, because of his athleticism, his range, his ability to kind of make things happen all over the field, he is going to have an opportunity and maybe some of those sub packages to be on the field at that will linebacker spot. Regardless of who's eventually named a starter, both guys are going to play. They're going to play significant snaps, and that is a good thing because you can't just depend on your first 11 to get it done. Ideally, you're talking about 17 to 18 guys who need to be able to make contributions, need to be able to start in their respective roles. And so one of those guys, whether it's Miller, whether it's Combs, they are going to eventually emerge as the starter, but they're going to share that role with their counterpart, their colleague. And so don't really get bogged down in the competition. Just know that both of those guys are going to play, and the expectation is they are going to play well. Now, the people that had a chance to watch the practice, or if they've been able to read the reports, look, word on the street, it was a tough day in the back end. And it was a tough day because I'll say this, the New Orleans Saints receivers are dynamic. They're explosive. The combination of Chris Olave and Jordan Tyson, two of the best route runners that I evaluated when they were coming out in their respective classes, they can challenge you as a defensive back. And depending upon how you want to play, if you're playing off and in space and giving them access and you're not coming after the quarterback with the same kind of blitz pressures that you might utilize during the regular season, that's a lot of time and opportunity for those guys to get into their bag and create space. Now, the person that people talked about being victimized on a few different occasions was Travis Hunter. It is important that everyone understands Travis Hunter is less than a year removed from the ACL injury that prematurely cut short his season. There is something to being healthy and available to play and running in a straight line to being back to being who you are. Travis is not quite back, and it's a slow ramp up to getting him back to week one. Liam Coen has talked about, hey, we want to make sure we drop him in. We want to make sure that we ramp up his activity as we get closer to the regular season, but we have time. So you don't want to do too much too soon. You want him to find his confidence, particularly at corner, because he's going to be a starter at the cornerback spot, and then continue to make strides to be a guy that can contribute on offense. But he might not be a full-time two-way player, but a 1.5-way player is certainly something that the Jaguars can live with. He has continued to progress, but one area where he needs to work at, the communication, because this team is playing so much zone, because they're playing some matchup zone that has some nuances to it. Travis Hunter has to be comfortable communicating what he sees, and he has to be comfortable with his role within the scheme to be able to play in what I call a high IQ defense that provides answers to the many questions that offenses can present when they line up in trick 'em formations and those things. So Travis Hunter's on his way, needs to build up the reps, but so far so good for the second-year pro and the former number 2 overall pick in last year's draft. Another thing that stood out in the conversation was just making sure that the young tight ends begin to understand what their respective roles would be. And I know there was a lot of hubbub, a lot of conversation, a lot of consternation about the Jaguars taking 2 tight ends early in the draft, and particularly Nate Borachure in the second round. There were some that were saying that, hey, there were better players or better options in terms of maybe a complete tight end. But I'll say this, Borachure and Kozil have really come on strong. They've really done a really good job of being what the Jaguars want them to be, which are pass catchers that can block and get nasty on the edges. Before the game, Nate Borachure talked to Brett Martineau and talked about, like, hey, man, my job is to go out here. I want to fly around in the passing game, and I want to get some pancakes in the run game. Didn't necessarily come to fruition, but that speaks to him understanding his role, how they want to use him, and how the tight ends are expected to be key factors, not only as pass catchers, but blockers on the perimeter. They got good work this week against the Saints. They had some of their struggles show up in the game, but Cozil and Borachure would be better for the opportunities that they were able to get last weekend, and it continue to help them kind of find a way to maybe carve out a role for themselves on a team and on an offense that is loaded with pass catchers and playmakers on the perimeter. Speaking of pass catchers and playmakers, a couple weeks ago, I talked about Parker Washington appearing to be the number one wide receiver for this team. Now, that hasn't been verified. They won't talk about it in those terms, but there is no doubt that all the positive buzz that you're hearing coming out of camp is validation for Parker Washington kind of growing and ascending into his role. As I listen to the coaches talk about, hey man, every time you give this guy more responsibility, he not only handles it, but he flourishes with those opportunities. Started as a punt returner, man, quickly found a way to be a guy that is very, very productive in doing that. You saw the 2 touchdowns last year. One of the only guys, like we talk about, like one of 4 guys in NFL history that had like 750 receiving yards and 2 punt return touchdowns. The names on that list are ridiculous, but it's Deshaun Watson, Deshaun Jackson, it is Steve Smith, and some others that have been able to do it. So that kind of speaks to who Parker Washington could be as he continues to grow. And interesting, because I brought up the name, because I watched this guy grow firsthand, Steve Smith for the Carolina Panthers. The reason I want to make this loose comparison between Parker Washington and Steve Smith is because it's like deja vu when I watch Parker Washington continue to grow and continue to take on more roles when many of us didn't expect him to be a prominent player in the passing game. When Steve Smith came to the Carolina Panthers, he was a 3rd-round pick. I come in there his 2nd year, and look, he'd been a Pro Bowl player as a punt returner, but he is now beginning to kind of be like the 3rd receiver. They got him in the game. They're finding different ways to get it to him. Touches that were derived on reverses and fly sweeps and those things. They would do some little underneath things. But then some injuries happen, and then he extends. He's in the starting lineup, and now you see the big plays happen, and now he's more consistent. And before you know it, he's wide receiver 2. And then as he makes more plays and begins to put the ball in the paint consistently, he somehow becomes the number 1 receiver. I'm not saying that Parker Washington is on his way to being what I think Steve Smith is going to be, which is a gold jacket guy. But what I am saying is I'm seeing him slowly climb the ranks and gain the trust of not only his coaches, but the quarterback. When Parker spoke last week about being the first one in the building and the race to be in at 4:30 to 5 o'clock a.m. to make sure that he is doing the work before others and how that has challenged others to come in, man, that's a worker bee. And consistent workers are always rewarded, particularly here in this culture, in this environment. This is a team that wants a blue collar mentality. They want their blue chip players to exhibit that blue collar mentality, and they want their best players to be their hardest workers. Parker Washington might not be the best player or viewed as the best player yet, but man, it's hard to say that anyone is outworking him in the building. And as he continues to work, you're beginning to see more dimensions added to his game. If you've been at Miller Electric when they've had the open sessions, you've seen him dominate and make play after play on the open field. When you're at the joint practice sessions and you see him make play after play against top competition. When you go back at the end of the year last year, you see him make critical plays for this team in the passing game. You begin to think like, hey, this is a part of his DNA. More importantly, this is a part of who he is, and who he is trending to be is the number 1 receiver in the passing game. Now, there's still going to be some competition in terms of who is the number 1 playmaker in the passing game, because Brian Thomas Jr. is also having an outstanding camp. And the camp that he is having comes on the heels of this team having a really transparent conversation about what they needed from him to get better. Liam Coen talks about better and best. Hey, what are your 3 things that you can do better? What are the 3 best things that you're doing right now? Let's continue to excel at doing the things that we're best at, but let's get better at these areas. Brian Thomas Jr. has attacked his weak spots in the offseason, and we're seeing a very confident playmaker on the outside. And I think it's funny because he had a disappointing year when it comes to like the total output, but the yards per catch remained the same, meaning he's just as lethal as a playmaker as he was his rookie season. And despite whatever struggles we may perceive him to have last year, he certainly continues to put up those big numbers, and that should continue in this offense as he settles in. And Trevor complimented him, talked about his approach, talked about the trust and the chemistry and the continuity that they've developed over the course of the offseason. I asked him why. He said, like spending more time. They're spending more time together. And so these relationships are real. And when you have great relationships with your playmakers, there's a little mental telepathy that can occur. So you're on the same page. You see things together before the defense even sees it. So now you can throw the ball early because you know your guy you trust your guy to get to the spot because you're seeing the game through the same prism. Brian Thomas Jr. is beginning to do that. We've known that Parker Washington has done it. Jacoby Myers has done that since he showed up. And then the big money guy, Brendan Strange, has also been able to do it. So now all of a sudden we're talking about a wide receiver core that is deep, that's talented, that has all kinds of layers and different dimensions to it. And we haven't even talked about Travis Hunter coming in as maybe a package player, a big play specialist that'll come in and do some things that are designed to get his hands on the ball and allow him to go to work. Now you're talking about a quintet where these guys can really make it hard on the opponent to figure out how to match up. And if you can't match up with them correctly, well, now Trevor Lawrence is going to find some favorable matchups, and it's going to be a long day for the opponent. Love how the offense is trending when it comes to the passing game. The only question I have is in the running game. Chris Rodriguez, Grant Allen, Tudin, who's going to be the guy that is the lead back? All signs point to Chris Rodriguez kind of being the lead horse, the rugged runner between the tackles, but we just got to see it. We just need to see it before we can validate and verify and stamp him as being the go-to guy. We have seen flashes from Tudin with his speed and explosiveness, but you got to see the consistency. So you got to see him iron some of those things out. And then LaQuint Allen might be the pound for pound toughest player this team has on the roster, excel in pass protection. He is physical. He will not turn down a one-on-one shot with a linebacker in the hole. He lives for it, delivers, but also is crafty enough to get in the flat and make things happen in the passing game. Overall, there's some questions about the run game, but I think some of those questions might actually have been solved during the preseason opener when I saw my little running back kind of go busy. We talk about Jamari Taylor, undrafted free agent from UVA by way of NHBCU. He showed up, man. This dude took a heavy workload, was really running the heck out of that outside zone. And the thing that showed up to me and watching the game, they didn't have explosive plays. I think the longest game was maybe 13 yards on the ground, but it was the steady drip and production that allowed them to do what they wanted to do, passing-wise, utilizing play action and those things. And being very intentional about the run game and being very committed to the run game, they eventually opened up and created big things in the passing game. That is exactly how I think this team is going to operate in the regular season. And that is saying something because Grant Udinsky, the offensive coordinator, was calling plays this game, not Liam Coen, but I know it came down from the top. Let's have some balance. Let's remain committed to the run game. Then we can throw it all over the yard. You can see it beginning to come together. I would expect to see an even better performance next week as the guys continue to settle in to the nuances and the differences that occur when Grant takes over the play calling duties for Liam Coen. Oh, I did have a chance to ask Liam Coen about these things. Why is Grant Udinsky calling the offense when calling plays are your superpower? And he said, you always want to make sure that you take care of your guys for the professional development. It is something that he learned when he was a young coach. He had people that allowed him to handle roles and responsibilities that exceeded his job title, and that allowed him to be very prepared for when he got his opportunity to step into that next role. Well, for Grant, who has been an offensive coordinator but hasn't called plays in Jacksonville, this is an opportunity for him to build his resume, more importantly, to become more confident and comfortable calling plays in this offense when anything could happen. Because one of the things that came out of the conversation, Liam said, hey, we got to have contingency. What if something happens to me where I get sick, I can't show up on game day? How does this operate? Who's the offensive play caller? Who's the defensive play caller? Who acts as the pseudo head coach? All of those things have to be discussed. They have to be practiced. It has to be routine so the players don't feel like it's something different when new guys are in different roles. And that's what this team has been doing. They're very intentional about that. Now, I'm going to run over my time a little bit, but I want to get this out because I think it's important. Had a chance to really listen to Trevor Lawrence talk in our production meeting, and there were some things that really came up. One, it's the most comfortable and confident that we have seen Trevor. Like this offseason, throughout OTAs, throughout mini camps and those things, he's very comfortable. And his comfort level comes from really understanding the system, developing a trust and a bond with the head coach, and just knowing what he needs to get to unlock different dimensions of this offense. He talked about his understanding of the run game and how much has improved and how that allows the Jags potentially in the regular season to do even more damage on the ground, where they can do some check with me's, they can do some two play call sequences where they have two play calls come in the huddle, and then he kills it and runs to the appropriate one that takes advantage of the defense. And sometimes that second call is a run. Love all that. I would say that his maturity in terms of his communication with his guys continues to grow because he's not afraid to hold guys accountable. He has talked about it in press conferences. He continues to talk about it. You see it happen on the field. And he does it in such the right way, meaning he'll challenge, he'll make sure that he'll confirm that you know exactly what you're doing, but he'll love you up at the same point. And for a guy who has always been kind of the superstar at every level, the guy who was celebrated in high school and in college and the pros, he has had to grow into that role because it's an uncomfortable role because everyone doesn't love the leader. But he has become a guy that understands, hey, I got to make sure that I have a level of accountability between myself and my teammates to make sure that this team maximizes the potential. More importantly, that I have a great chemistry and connection with my pass catchers to help me begin to play at the level that I want to play at consistently, which is, hey, aspiring to be a top 5 quarterback. The urgency, the attention to detail, the way that this offense is operated, you certainly love that. You love how that is beginning to kind of come through. And even though it doesn't matter, meaning the regular season doesn't count, it certainly matters. And the bounce back from the team in the second half, it speaks volumes about the resilience and the toughness that the entire squad has, but more importantly, how the starters are going to operate in that vein. Last thing, we're talking about Josh Hines-Allen. I talked about it earlier. We talked about running to the football and those things. One thing that continues to be a big emphasis has been turnovers and stopping the run. And I'll add another thing, not giving up as many explosive plays. If you want to win football in this league, the National Football League, it comes down to turnovers. Can you force more turnovers than your opponent? Limiting explosives on defense, creating explosives on offense, whatever you define explosives being, but you got to find a way to get big plays on offense to be able to score. And then on defense is about minimizing the big plays, making the opponent drive the length of the field. And if you do that, the odds are in your favor that at some point a mess up, we either kick them out of range or they'll mess up the thing in the kicking game, and it will be advantage Jaguars. Last part, turnovers. We talked about the quarterback and the pass rush. I talked about Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen. And Josh Hines-Allen talked about, hey, the importance of us doing our job up front is we have the ability to affect the most important player in the game, and that's the quarterback. And the way that you impact the quarterback and change what he's thinking, change what he's feeling, you got to get close enough to him where you either hit him or you make him uncomfortable in the pocket. And that is something that we're going to continue to monitor as we talk about some of these young guys getting opportunities and playing ahead of week 2 of the preseason. So we're going to wrap it up here. That was the Bucky Brooks Show. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe to the podcast on the Believe Network. Make sure you tell a friend about the cool things that we're doing, particularly as it relates to talking about the Jags. A lot of great information that people are providing, a lot of great observations that we're able to make by being around the team, and a lot of optimism that this team is going to live out some of our wildest dreams as they go forward. We're not going to put on our fandom, but we are going to be real about this team. This team is a good one. And even though people are judged by the preseason scores and those things, I am just telling you, when this team kicks it off, I think everyone is going to be pleasantly surprised by the way they're able to dominate in various facets of the game. But until then, I am Bucky Brooks. This is Bucky Brooks Show. Make sure you come back later in the week for another episode on this pod.